Welcome, audience, to Regenerate, the latest podcast coming out of the National Regenerative Agriculture Day in Australia, which, by the way, is coming up this February the 14th of Valentine's Day, as we attempt to hijack Valentine's Day. And Carbon8, the charity behind transitioning farmers to regenerative agriculture. So
Good morning,
we are
Kelly
joined. Hello, Miss McCusker. It's so great to be here today, Wednesday morning. And we're joined by two amazing guests who our audience will consider quite rock stars in the Regen8 space, Walter Denny and Judith D. Swartz. And I think, Helen, you want to give a quick update about what's happening with our film festival, and we're going to get into some nitty-gritty conversations with our two amazing guests.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kelly. And firstly, I'd like to welcome Walter and Judith. I think we've been sharing the same space for some time. I think it's like the overnight success in 20 years, really, isn't it? With regenerative agriculture just taking the limelight right now, which is really exciting. But right now, we've got a film festival. For those of you who don't know, it's a Friday filmy, foodie farmer film festival, and every Friday night we've been screening some wonderful films, and we're really excited that the month of December is going to be all about our Indigenous storytelling. So we just feel that regenerative agriculture actually, we can't really be in the space without our real history. So it's a really important part of the regenerative agriculture space. So we've got movies coming up on over the next few weeks, and we've got an amazing podcast that we're doing. So just keep an eye on that. We've got that's all on our Facebook page called the Carbon8 Film Festival, if you guys want to check that out. So
and it's free. It's free for everyone. Friday nights. Very important bit of information there. In support of everything that's going on the planet. This is our little attempt to entertain you and hold you safe and sound.
Right. So for those of you who are live, if you would like to ask questions while you're watching, please feel free. This is just very much a conversation about, I think one of the things that we spoke about in sharing our ideas is that what do reindeers and rivers in the sky have to do with each other? So that's a really wonderful way, I think, to kick off the discussion. And maybe, Judith, if I can introduce you and your amazing book, The Reindeer Chronicles, and just to let everyone know, Judith is a journalist. She has she's been in this space for a long time, as I said, but she's written a number of books, and this Reindeer Chronicles is the one that is actually, I haven't read it, but it's very dear to my heart because this conversation around the Indigenous community is really important. So Judith, over to you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so the Reindeer Chronicles, and the full title is "And Other Inspiring Stories of Working with Nature to Heal the Earth," is really a global tour of earth repair. And so I visit or have my sources I didn't get to China, I didn't get to the Middle East, but I did go to Norway and Spain and New Mexico and Hawaii and all these places. And, really, I just felt it was so important. Okay, a few motivations for writing this book. Okay, so often when I find myself pulled into writing a book, I look at what is missing from the conversation. And I felt really strongly that what has been missing from the climate conversation is the role of functioning ecosystems in climate regulation. And this is something I've learned so much about from Walter. But basically, we know how to restore ecosystems. We know how to heal different kinds of landscapes and coastal areas, from forests to grasslands to deserts. And I wanted to bring that to the fore because unless we know that that's possible, how can we start to look at what we could do for the future? So that's really the source of the book. And in terms of reindeer, one reason that I focus on the reindeer is that we have so many misunderstandings about the impact of animals on our landscapes. And so in Norway, okay, basically I'll just bring you into the story. So when I went to Norway, what was very much in the news was a legal case that the Norwegian government was demanding that indigenous Sami herders cull their herds because the Norwegian government said that we have too many reindeer, and that is causing a problem with the fragile ecosystem of the far north. Okay, so what was going on was that this young reindeer herder, I think he was all of 23, kept challenging this and bringing this to increasingly higher and higher courts and saying, no, I'm not going to cull my herd because it's not the right thing to do. And also ecologically, but also that means that reindeer herders of my generation won't be able to get a start, because if we don't have sufficient numbers to make a living, then this tradition that is dear to our hearts and central to our culture cannot continue. So in doing research, what I found out was that actually the Norwegian government had it wrong, and that the reindeer actually were preserving the ecosystem. And the way that that happens is this. And I'll just give a little bit, and I know that Walter will in a moment jump in and give us much more scientific detail about how these dynamics work. But so basically we've got, imagine, I know you're in Australia. It's a lot easier for me to imagine because I'm here in Vermont where it has just started snowing. I took a brisk walk with the snow coming down. And anyway, I enjoy that. And it was beautiful. Okay, so we've got Norway, the far north of Norway. We've got these beautiful reindeer who we are going to start thinking about their likes in the next month or so as the holiday season comes upon us. So in the summer season, this is how it works. The reindeer are nibbling at brush and small trees. And the reason that this is helpful in maintaining the tundra ecosystem is that those brush and the small trees have dark leaves, and the dark leaves have a lower albedo, which means that they are absorbing heat instead of reflecting heat, whereas the native grasses, the heath land, has a much lighter tone, and so that is reflecting heat. Okay, so that's one thing. So the research has shown that helps maintain the system. It promotes the cooling of that system. And in the winter, when you have these huge herds of reindeer being moved across the snowy landscape, the reindeer are pressing down the snow with their hooves. You think of numbers, and that's like really, really, having an impact on the snowpack. And while that sounds like a negative effect, it sounds like, oh, well, they're mussing up this, beautiful, fluffy snow. Actually, in pressing down the snow, the snow was acting as insulation. And so in pressing it down, they are exposing the soil to the very cold air, and that is maintaining the permafrost. So that keeps the soil frozen. So those dynamics are really, really interesting and not what we would automatically think of if we imagine these animals on the landscape. But, the kind of darker side of this is that we now know, and I've been in touch with people in the Sami community, is that what had been considered by the, powers that be in Norway, kind of a wasteland. Oh, we can't really do anything with that northern territory, so that's all right if the Sami want to do their thing. That's, nice for tourism, it's picturesque. But now there are minerals up in that region that businesses and the government would like to get at. There's the potential for hydropower up there in Finnmark, this county in Norway. And so the indigenous community is really concerned that as their territory becomes more appealing for development, that they will begin to lose rights to their land in a way that is accelerating. They've always had to struggle for their rights, but they're concerned about what is going to happen. And I'll just leave just with a comment that what they are calling this is a green colonialism, that in the guise of green development, such as hydropower and some minerals that might be used in solar arrays, say, that they are actually undermining the way of life for the people who are of this land and know how to manage this land in a sustainable way.
Yeah, that's really, Judith, that conversation seems to be echoed across the globe. You know, the eco-genocide that's happening, even in Australia with our directions trees, and, you know, what's happened at the gorge. And I think that this what we call the new awakening is that all of us have a responsibility to say, we're all in this together, and we live on our planet together, and we all have a say in what's happening, all of us, you know. So I think that all of this information that we talk about and all of that discussion around hope is that our past and our history is the thing that will move us forward into really positive ways. So, you know, Walter, I think that you're smiling.
I'm not always happy.
You're always happy, and I think that, you know, you two have traversed this space, and just to let everyone know, what Walter and I have done a few gigs together, and it's always such a pleasure to hear you speak. And Walter's really wonderful at bringing that you know, that science discussion into really wonderful storytelling ways, and I'm hoping that you'll do the same. Is there anything that you could take from the words that Judith just shared with us?
Well, look, hello, everybody, and thank you very much. And the question, you know, what do reindeer and rivers in the sky have in common? And of course, as Judith said, it's all about nature, its wonder, its healing, and its balance. But being a bit Australian, because we've got to be fairly sort of focused, it's also coming towards Christmas time, and therefore we're all hoping that we'll get some more rain from the rivers in the sky, because Australia, and this is quite serious now, the latest research is, we're losing rainfall. You know, the Bureau of Meteorology and the CSIRO have just sort of announced we have warmed 14.4 degrees centigrade in the last 80 years, and our rainfall in southern Australia has declined already 12%. And we're expecting, up to a 30% decrease. And so the whole business about how do we actually look at these things we've taken for granted, the climate, the biosystem.
Oh, I think we've lost Walter.
We've lost Walter there.
Might have been an interruption on the electronics.
Yeah, we've got you back, Walter.
Okay, I'm back, Okay, so all of those things are under challenge. And so basically this is a critically important thing. What is it, as you've said, Helen, what is it that we can do and have to do to address this? And in a sense, what we're bringing to the discussion, which is a little bit novel, but it's very simple and natural, is if we go back and look at the Earth, you know, 420 million years ago, it was just ocean and rock. And nature used life to create the biosystems that we fundamentally depend on. And it did that through a whole sequence of simple natural processes. And so the message that we're saying is, yes, all we have to do is respect nature, understand those processes, and help her to regenerate those sequences, those processes, and then we can restore biosystems, climates, hydrology, ecology back where they can help us. And so the key message, and we can go into all the scientific detail and verify every step, but the key message is very simple, that yes, we are facing enormous crises. You know, this decade, it's going to be enormously challenging if we don't do this correctly, but all the tools, all the solutions are there in nature. And it's just a matter of saying, okay, well, what is the problem? How did nature solve this problem? What do we have to do to get our boot off her throat and let her breathe to fix it, and hopefully help her in that process? So it's very, very positive, very rewarding, worth smiling about, but definitely the transition, the challenge before Homo hubris, humanity, is enormous, right? So that's the value of these discussions.
Yeah,
So you guys, you have spent, both of you collectively, you travel and you talk to a lot of groups, and over the last sort of 12 months to 2 years, you would have seen a great increase in people's consciousness, awareness, like groups coming together in communities. I'm of the thought process, I really feel that we're about to go into a phase of massive worldwide regeneration. And all of these topics that we've been championing for so long are actually going to become way more standard practices. And would you testify to that in your travels around the world? Have you noticed and played witness to a shift in attitudes and a massive movement towards regeneration?
Yes, look, if I could just start with that one. Look, absolutely. Look, we've been in this game for 20 years, and of course it was initially sowing the seeds and asking the questions, and obviously a slow process, but yes, it's sort of accelerated all the way through. And now there's enormous receptivity there. Everybody's very interested. A lot of people talking about it. So it is like the 1,000 flowers that are now blooming. It's like the weeds coming out after the rain. And yes, they're coming up everywhere. But we've got to be a little bit careful as well, because now we've got a lot of people talking the talk. And yes, having those aspirations, but often not getting down to really what is the understanding and how do we actually do more than just talk about it, actually engage and do it. And of course, do it in a practical way that empowers people from the grassroots. And of course, in such a way that it actually addresses the problems. For example, in climate change, we're often so focused on the symptom, of our degradation, i.e. the CO2 that we're putting in the air. And so we see the CO2 as a problem. And of course, in a way it is, but it's really a symptom of the bigger problem, our degeneration. But it's also the resource for fixing the problem. Okay, it's because it's taking that carbon from the air, returning it back into the soil to rebuild the Earth's soil carbon sponge, to rebuild hydrology, to rebuild green life, longevity of green. And so it's a resource, and we always see things as linear reductionist problems rather than this is a disturbed cycle. And basically, as long as we understand it, we can actually restore that cycle using natural processes and using her to help us.
Yeah, I think, Kelly, your discussion around, the audiences that are coming in and really wanting to know this information, from my perspective, working with farmers, probably with Mike and me teaching farmers in this space for 15 years. And it's probably the same with you, Walter and Judith, like just in the last 2 years, we used to have farmers that were 18 or 20 people used to come to hear, to come to a field day. And now we're getting, 100, 150, and it's so exciting to see, that, and it's the young farmers that are coming in as well. So they're really thirsty. And I think the thing that in the conversations that is so important is that all of us are contributing to this. There's not one sort of solution. we're all making mistakes and we're all learning with each other along the way. And this is what's so great about this regenerative agriculture community, is that basically we're all sharing our stories about what is working for us and what isn't. So, Judith, your discussion around reindeers, and it's very similar to the way that we manage our cattle on our properties. It's very similar, the way that, that whole thing about, making sure that they're all packed in together, that they have a quick turnaround, all of that holistic grazing and management is replicates nature and the way that nature works. And also, with Alan Savory and the work that he's done with the elephants, it mirrors that, doesn't it, Judith?
Absolutely. And I want to add something about, we're talking about hope, and, there's hope and interest, and there's also a lot of fear. And what I want to put out there is that in looking at stories of ecosystem restoration globally, that often the most successful projects are in the most extreme circumstances. So that in itself can give us hope. I was listening to Walter talk about the concern about the loss of rain, and it made me think about a story that I was able to share in this book about the transformation of a desert landscape in Western Saudi Arabia, where they might go a couple of years between rainfalls. Okay, so there's a young American permaculture designer named Neil Spackman was asked to be part of this program, a poverty reduction project in Western Saudi Arabia, and he brought in an ecological component. So they had a site, and he worked with the local Bedouin community, and what they did was they prepared for rain, even, which they knew, because what I thought it was very interesting how Neil defines a desert. We think that we know what a desert is in terms of, that there's some threshold that below a certain amount of rain, well, that's a desert. He said that a desert is a place where when it rains, it floods. Because once you create the conditions, once you, as in Walter's terms, create the soil carbon sponge and you are able to hold that water, the land ceases to be desert. And that is what Neil and his team were able to do in Saudi Arabia. So they created small water harvesting techniques, and they planted trees, and so whenever it rained, they went out and planted. And so they designed different swales, a whole variety of techniques to slow the water down. And plants started growing, grass started growing, trees. And then what happened was, after about 5 years, in 2016, the project ran out of funds, and so they had to stop the irrigation. So they were only using the water. They set a water budget according to what they were able to capture. So they had to stop the irrigation, and, they had to just kind of see what worked. And Neil went back a couple of years later, and 80% of the trees survived because they were able to build that system. And the photos, the before and after photos, are brilliant because you see perennial grasses growing where there was nothing, where it was just rock, because they were able to hold that water. So anyway, that was a really extreme case. I mean, the level of heat that they get, and the lack of rain that they have, and yet they were able to change that system. So when I hear the challenges in Australia, I'm able to know that there are possible ways of bringing life into those places, and in doing so, changing the water dynamics, the ability for soil to hold water, and for plants to grow, and for plants to transpire and transform solar energy, and for healing to begin.
Yeah, and this, what Judith said is wonderful because, I mean, as an example, you see, when you think, okay, here's a desert that doesn't get enough rain, but then you ask yourself, what is rain? And rain is, in a sense, something we've defined as, well, what's at the bottom of a rain gauge every morning. And so if we don't have anything in the bottom of that little tin can, it hasn't rained, and therefore there's no rain. But of course, nature doesn't work on that basis at all, because the air above the whole planet is circulating all the time, and up to 50,000 parts per million of that air is water. And so there's rivers of water are flowing across all the Earth's oceans and all the land surfaces continually. You know, CO2 is 420 parts per million. Here's 50,000 parts per million water in the air. And so it's a question of, okay, is that land surface able to harvest some of those rivers of water from the air? And how have we changed those land surfaces to either enhance or prevent that harvesting process? And of course, you see, so we step out of that paradigm of a desert, instead of it being a construct in our mind that it doesn't rain. We haven't had it rain in the tin can. No, we've got this wonderful continual free resource above us continually. Can we harvest some of it? And Judith, in America, the sequoia forests in San Francisco and on the western coast, they get 80% of their moisture from the mists and fogs coming off the Pacific Ocean that they condense on their leaves and harvest. It doesn't rain. I mean, it's their wet forests, rainforests, but it all comes from that aerial water. And so here's a whole opportunity, if we understand and respect nature, to say, okay, how do we design ecosystems that can actually then harvest that water and turn what we would otherwise call deserts into productive ecosystems? Australia, you know, we say, yes, it is the driest inhabited continent, right? No question about it. But 95% of our deserts are green. They're vegetated. They've got plants. Plants have evolved over 40 million years with exquisite evolutions to actually harvest this water. And we can learn from that. And of course, we can use that to regenerate.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things that particularly people that are living in the cities, they're you know, there's that absolute thirst for hope and knowledge around what is it that I can do. And obviously everyone knows about the importance of planting trees, but it's so much deeper than that, isn't it, Walter? It's so much deeper than that. And it's actually around, you know, understanding that the trees and our ecosystems provide that ability to create the water, which is actually not just something from out of the sky, but they all interact together, and it's all about the ground cover.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's one thing is, yeah, see, this is again wonderful. It's what can I do to actually create these trees? Yes, and let's take Canberra, where I live, as an example. Yes, how do we create the urban forests? But then that urban forest creates the habitat in which we live. And of course, that habitat in Canberra, and Canberra's an artificial city that we created, or actually Marion Mahoney, Walter Burley Griffin created 100 years ago. And in the green parts where we have an urban forest, it can be 12 degrees centigrade cooler on a hot summer's day, a 40-degree day, than it is in the concrete jungles 5 kilometers where they don't have trees. Okay, so it's not just how do we grow trees, but let's now quantify the values, the benefits of those trees. And, you know, 12 degrees natural air conditioning cooler, and wow, in terms of energy saving, habitat, land values, it's enormous. But then we can...
He's paused.
We've got well, cheeky grin.
I always find it so... Oh, he's back?
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah. What are the what are the health consequences of this urban forest? And of course, that's enormous, because now we're working out, look, the heat stress differences, the aerosols, the cleaner air. It has literally billions of dollars worth of health benefits, relative to the actual social, mental and physical health consequences if we don't have this. So it's not just how do we do it, but then how do we actually capture and respect these values? And then once we do, we would say, well, look, this is just logical. It's elementary. Let's restore, let's regenerate these ecologies, because that's the only solution practically that we've got to secure the safe future.
I mean, it's so exciting, Walter and Judith, because essentially the only element that's like in lack here is human consciousness. So the Earth's
Absolutely.
ability to regenerate is a given. Like, it's an amazing system. It's godly and beautiful in its design. And it's only human consciousness that needs to sort of catch up to, stepping out of the way or expanding or evolving alongside it. And I think right now we're on that cusp, which is so exciting for the human race and the Earth as a whole.
Look,
and
No, absolutely. And it's that sort of, just giving ourselves the space to look at nature, marvel at nature, but not just in awe, but then really say, look, here is the simple process understanding. Hey, we can use that to regenerate. And through that, here are all the benefits that flow.
Yeah, I think another conversation in all of this is, Kelly and I have spoken in the past about the nutrient density, and which is a great conversation to have. And the soil is the thing that gives us our food, that creates that density and makes us healthy. And if we have healthy soils, and we have healthy food, and we have a healthy planet, it's all, and then healthy animals, it all flows on, doesn't it? So that it's just not just about, again, it doesn't come back to just planting a tree. It's that creating the awareness about everything that we do and what we grow. And what's so beautiful is that every single person can do it. They can go into their garden and they can start following the journey of planting veggies in their backyard, and watch the ground cover and put carbon into their soil. And that's what's really fantastic.
Look, it's wonderful, isn't it? When you think of it, nature, what did she have? Well, she started off with sunshine, CO2, water, and stardust. And stardust, of course, are all the minerals that then coalesce to make the 9 planets. And of course, that's rock and that's soil. But that's where the minerals come from, right? So it's all there. And these minerals haven't escaped from the Earth. I mean, some hydrogen, helium has, but all the minerals are still on Earth as they were 4.6 billion years ago. And now the question is simply, how available are those nutrients to life to drive the whole life nutritional plant process? And of course, nature evolved microbes to solubilize these minerals. And so it's, again, so beautiful. All we have to say is, well, what are these solubilization processes that nature's got? How are we impeding them? Or can we enhance them? If we can enhance them and make these minerals from that mineral stardust, or nutrients from that mineral stardust, more available, we can vastly increase the bioproductivity of our soils and our food, and of course, in that way, our nutritional health, without having to add nutrients. I mean, the nutrients are all there in the soil. Now, sure, we have to recycle some of them from our waste, absolutely critical, but that's all part of that same respecting those microbial processes, which comes a little bit into what Judy's talking about in the Reindeer Chronicles, because, I mean, there we're talking about mammals, bigger animals, but it's really the animals in life that have been so fundamental in this cycling processes, and in a sense enriching and empowering and making these ecosystems ever more productive. So we don't just see them as people eating or harvesting the system, they are actually driving these life cycles. And again, we've got to look at this animal ecology in those terms.
Look, Judith, I would love to hear some of your amazing stories or moments that you've come across in regards to animals in the last couple of years, and potentially some that have really surprised you or have been very unusual in your processes with regeneration.
Well, I can go right to your country. There's a fellow that I've interviewed and talked to named Chris Hengler, who so he manages, it's funny, the analogy I always use to most audiences is that he manages a tract of land the size of the 5 boroughs of New York City, but you're in Australia. I don't know how big that is in Australian terms. Anyway, he manages a lot of land in the Kimberley, and a challenge, unsurprisingly, in a large landscape is dealing with fire. So, as Walter, points out, it's good to inquire about how did nature solve its problems. Okay, so in nature we have the life cycle, birth, growth, death, and decay, and plants grow and go, and certainly smaller plants, grasses go through that cycle. So you have a lot of vegetation. And in the dry season, much of that vegetation, some of that vegetation would dry out and become fodder for fire. Okay, so nature wants to break down that material. So one way is chemically through fire. Other ways are through like animals eating the vegetation, and then that cycles it and it becomes incorporated into the soil, and that helps build the soil carbon sponge, which maintains moisture in the landscape. So Chris in the Kimberley observed that there were lots of wild donkeys. And similar to the situation in Norway, the government of Western Australia considers the donkeys pests. Chris saw them as filling a niche in the ecosystem because they would eat the vegetation and which then would go into back and cycle through in nature. And therefore, when the season for wildfires would come upon us, there was less vegetation. Now he would, steer the animals in particular places because he knows where the vulnerable places are. But, it's really very powerful to look at, sometimes our assumptions are, these animals weren't here in the past, therefore they're bad. But in the case of Australia, the megafauna that used to be integral to the development of your ecosystems are no longer there. So these hidden megafauna, because we don't think of them as belonging there, are actually filling a void. Walter,
Look,
I'd love to hear your thoughts
look,
about
this. Thank you, Judith. And look, this is, again, so profound and really deep. Now, let's just look at that in more detail. See, again, basically, everything in nature is based on life. And basically, this is photosynthesis, plants growing, and, of course, providing the food for life, the sugars that are driving life. And everything that grows and lives, of course, has to be recycled and effectively dies and basically has to be cycled. And basically, there are only 2 processes in nature that actually allow that to happen. It's, as Judith said, it's either chemical oxidation, i.e. burning, or does it get biodigested? Does it get biologically broken down by microbes? And they're either in the soil or they're in our guts or rumens in these mobile biodigesters we call herbivores, right? So basically it's either burning or biodegradation. It's either fire or fungi. And so really it's these two concepts, and every gram of organic matter that's ever been produced on this terrestrial planet, every piece of plant is either burnt or been biodegraded. If it gets burnt, basically it goes straight back to CO2, and we end up with, again, a mineral desert or a primary, just a mineral substrate. And as Neil Spackman showed in Saudi Arabia, that can't hold water. But if it gets biodigested by animals and microbes, it forms a soil carbon sponge. And that organic matter that we're creating in the soil can then retain and infiltrate water, infiltrate and retain water, make that water available, and make life ever more productive in a positive feedback loop. So we have this very simple binary divide in nature: fire or fungi, burn or biodigest, biocycle. And of course, what we humans have been doing, our industrial humans, we've been actually sort of on steroids, burning everything: fossil fuels, degrading landscapes, deforestation. So we've been massively burning. And of course, we're seeing the symptom, the increased CO2 in the atmosphere, as a direct result of that excessive burning. And so the balance is, again, extremely simple. We've got to have more biodegradation, more fungi, more microbes, rebuilding that soil carbon sponge. So it's that simple. And of course, herbivores, as Judith has said, whether reindeer or donkeys or microbes, are just the tools. They're just our agents, nature's agents. And if we use them wisely, they're actually doing all the work for us. And it's exquisite. And of course, all we have to do, again, is just understand, respect, and then regenerate those processes.
Walter, I think that you've helped, actually, both of you have helped answer the question. So Naomi Clark, hello Naomi, thanks for joining us. She's interested in our thoughts around controlled grazing on our bushlands. And this is exactly, Judith, what we're saying, that if it's done and managed appropriately, then definitely it's really key. It's what we've been doing. This is part of the natural cycle, isn't it?
Exactly. And that was a megafauna story that Judy said, wasn't it? Like, we used to have megafauna. They died out at the last ice age, basically through the ice age, partly hunting perhaps. But basically when we lost that megafauna, then fire became a dominant factor. And of course have made that Australian landscape ever more drier and, sort of vulnerable to more fire. And of course, it's really a case of saying, okay, what can we do to restore, that grazing ecology, to bring it back into soil carbon, hydrology, regeneration dynamic, rather than oxidation and desertification.
Right. How do you create the conditions for the landscape that you want, for a thriving landscape?
Yeah.
But of course, with the animals, they need to be managed appropriately. I mean, that just has to be said.
Yeah, I think that in terms of our cultural Indigenous burning in Australia and indeed everywhere, what's I found really quite amazing is that it was actually the women that did the burning, and it happened at night time. So they did a cold burn to make sure that, it was done, and it was the women that actually read the forest and could worked with nature to find the best time to do that. And it's our women, and this is probably the thing that we've spoken on in some of our other podcasts, is that women in regenerative agriculture have been the ones, because we are the nurturers, and we have sort of led the charge in this space. So it's not surprising that it's our Indigenous women that have been looking after the caring and the burning of the landscape to help the ecosystem and regenerate it.
No question at all. No question. And of course, it was basically that cool burning, mosaic burning, which was actually cultivating that land for regrowing the yam daisies, regrowing all the seeds, making the green pick to bring in more herbivores so there's more protein food. So it was really gardening in a very intelligent, sensitive way. You see, so we see it as burning. No, this is really just skillful ecological land management. There's one other thing, though, in terms of the animal that we're working on at the moment. I mean, more than working on, we're documenting, and it's a compelling case because these animals, we're saying, okay, they're giving us food and biosystems, but these animals actually directly influence the climate and directly cool the climate. And if you just bear with me for 3 minutes, I'll go through what's happened. You see, basically the Earth has been basically getting cooler over the last 100 million years in the Pleistocene. And we've been having all these ice ages, right? So definitely the geological record is quite clear that the Earth, was warmer, about 5-6 degrees centigrade warmer 300 million years ago, but now it's been, for the last 100 million years, getting cooler. And so there must be processes doing that, particularly because the sun, it's a nuclear reactor, is getting hotter. It's expanding, getting hotter. So we've got this paradox. How is the Earth getting cooler, creating these ice ages, when in fact it should be getting hotter because the sun, the incident solar radiation, is getting hotter? And of course, we've looked at that, and the answer is, well, how did these polar ice caps form? And in a sense, when you track it back, it's exquisite, and it's all due to animals. Okay, and what used to happen up to about 100 years ago, 150 years ago, we had massive numbers of mammals in the world's oceans, whales. Of course, we hunted them all for ladies' corsets and lighting oil, but basically we've killed 98% of the Earth's whale biomass, to get those corsets and that lighting oil. But in doing that, we've basically stopped 98% of the whale excreta going into the oceans. And that excreta is the most productive nutrient source for growing phytoplankton. Okay, so if we look at phytoplankton growth in the ocean, it's very much in response to the excreta from these warm-blooded mammals. And of course, this phytoplankton produces the aerosols, the dimethyl sulfides and what have you, that James Lovelock showed us in the 1960s are responsible for cloud formation. And of course, those cloud formations in the southern oceans and the high latitudes and the northern oceans actually had an enormous albedo effect, cooling those polar regions, allowing the polar ice caps to form, and of course conserving all that water on those ice caps. Okay, and so really it was basically whales, through their excreta, through their phytoplankton, through their aerosols, through their cloud albedos, that actually cooled the planet over this last 100 million years and have maintained those ice caps. Of course, they're no longer being maintained. They're melting now because we don't have that process anywhere as strong as it used to be. But here we've got this direct scientific linkage between what we've done to the whales and how our climate is changing. Okay, way beyond the CO2 greenhouse component in the atmosphere. The timing and the dimension of this is far, far higher. But it's sort of making that point of here's animal ecology and our mismanagement of it, our ignorance of it, and the consequences are going way beyond just fire or fungi or not having enough food. It's actually changing the Earth's climate. Okay, so the question is, can whales cool Antarctica? Can whales restore our polar, habitats? Can whales limit sea level rise? Because if these polar ice caps melt, we're going to go under tens of meters of sea level rise. And the answer is yes, they can. Now, it's a question of how fast and what have you, but the answer is, it's this point we started off the discussion: understand nature, respect nature, regenerate nature.
Right, and not to see nature simply as therefore our taking, but to take in ways that we can give back and keep the cycles going.
Absolutely, that respect for those natural cycles and the wonder, in fact, and this comes back to the Reindeer Chronicles, just Santa Claus, just wonder and just, understand the wisdom of nature and the elegance of nature in this.
Yeah. That we want a vision in our future, and knowing the fact that take heart for the Earth's ability to regenerate has been vastly underestimated. That gives us a perfect way to know that we can actually vision a future that is very different to what some might think is disaster, the deserts and the desertification that's happening. It's actually, we have the tools to be able to see through even visioning what that change could look like is really important. And in our communities, I think it's funny, I'm a farmer and we've gone through the process of looking at what do monoculture crops look like and what do they need, as opposed to a thriving diversity, sort of that multi-species crops. And you've got monoculture crops which are socially distanced. They don't have any thriving, they're given lots of chemicals and they don't thrive. Whereas when you've got a diverse ecosystem like multi-species crops, the soil thrives, everything thrives. The birds, even we planted a multi-species crop in the last season, and the birds, we've got so many more birds than we've ever seen. So that is just such a testament to making sure that we're not focusing on just the whales. We're not just focusing on just the reindeer. It's about all of us doing our thing, doing our bit, in different ways, creating that thriving potential in our community. So this is, I think, the learning that we can take from what's the difference between reindeers and rivers in the sky, that each one of us can make a difference.
Absolutely, and it's every square meter, every garden, balcony, every hectare of land, and it's empowering every individual, no matter what age, to say, look, just understand, respect, and then, grow that plant, rebuild that cycle, and it's empowering people. You have agency. You see, it's actually our management of the soil, the fire versus fungi, whether we build the soil carbon sponge or we oxidize it. That's our point of agency on this planet. It's the only point of agency Homo hubris has had on this planet. We've used it in ignorance, and now we have to use it with wisdom.
And that provides meaningful work for people all over the world.
And
right
food.
now there is such a disconnect between people who have no work, particularly during COVID time when people have lost their livelihoods, and work that needs to be done. And there are so many places around the world where the land is crying out for people to tend it. And
and look, go on, sorry.
Oh, no, you continue, Walter. I was just going to say, I'm very interested to continue talking on that topics around the world where people have actually stepped into the role of, taking on that challenge within their communities, and what that's looked like, and some of the success stories you both may have seen.
Well, look, this time last year, I was in Andhra Pradesh in India with the UN FAO and Vijay Kumar, who is the sort of coordinator of this thing. And he's working, for example, with 800,000 poor Indian women farmers they don't own the land, but they might have half an acre of land that they can lease or borrow or whatever. And then how do we use zero budget natural farming, these natural organic farming systems, to actually grow crops on that land? And of course, it's that simple grassroots empowerment. 800,000, poor women farmers who are now very productively growing healthy, nutritious crops, feeding their families, setting up little eco businesses, setting up employment opportunities, value creation and capture opportunities on their rural products, and really revitalizing these regional economies, so much so that the Indian government has taken that up as their sort of strategies beyond the Green Revolution for looking after the future of their 1.3 going on to 1.6 billion people. So yes, it's not just doable. Yes, we can. It's being done through this grassroots empowerment of young people, of women, and it's all about regenerating the Earth's soil carbon sponge, soil, bioproductivity, resilience, hydrology.
Yeah, and I think that what's happening with this in these COVID times is that people are becoming very resourceful. For the first time, they're actually, it's become very easy for us Westerners to turn up to the supermarket and just buy whatever we want on the shelves, to get our toilet paper, to get our fruit and veg. And, the one thing about COVID is it's actually made us think about, well, where does my toilet paper come from? What is that going on there? What is it, the fruit and vegetables, that maybe there's something that I could do for myself in my garden to help support my family in a potential, this COVID time. So it is actually, COVID has been, in one sense, very supportive of our ecosystems, because it's made people think about, their footprint.
And relocalizing local economies, employment. So, can I build those cycles within my community, whether it's waste recycling, food hubs, can I re-communitize or localize that social enterprise?
And Judith, are you finding that too in with your research of recently with your Reindeer Chronicles? Is that something
that was pre-COVID, but certainly here where I know that our local farmers are having a hard time keeping up with demand and all the garden supplies, and the seeds have been selling out, which is wonderful. Yeah, people are asking deeper questions, and that is important. I mean, here in the U.S., there's a lot of static, a lot of swirling anxiety that, so sometimes these messages get lost, but certainly people in cities have been talking about the importance of hearing birds as things slowed down. So I think that there are a lot of different threads kind of weaving in different ways simultaneously, but I think that definitely is happening, because what is here? What can you count on? And that is nature, which is always there. And I know that with homeschooling, children that aren't going to school, people are getting more devoted to outdoor education, and
So Judith, may I ask for our audience, because I just want to talk about your amazing new book for a second, which is called The Reindeer Chronicles and Stories to Inspire You. Was that the correct title?
Oh,
basically,
it's the idea.
it's an amazing collection of stories of people who have been basically doing what this whole conversation's been about, and regenerating all manner of the environment and communities and cultures. And would you be so kind to share with us one of your most favorite chapters in that book? And which, by the way, is available and will be available under the links here in this video, and an amazing Christmas stocking filler for this year's joyful season. So Judith, what was one of your favorite stories?
Oh my goodness. Well, sorry, you've got me there. Favorite.
Oh,
I
big
had some
word.
amazing trips. Okay, going to Spain was really, really wonderful. And so, just what made me think of that is talking about places that are crying out for people to tend the land. So, what's wonderful is to see when these disconnects are bridged. And there's a company called Common Land, which actually also works in Australia. They work by landscapes. They saw that this was this region of Spain, the Altiplano, the high plains, that the land wasn't yielding anymore. So farms were closing. You have like these beautiful old farmhouses, 500 years old, that were empty. And there were some farmers that were trying to make things happen. So they supported those farmers who were working regeneratively. And so what they did was created a kind of landscape approach to farming. So this is an area of the world that is the biggest almond production area in the world, where the almond trees are rain-fed. So almonds are the center. So, but what they did was they added more layers to that. So there were the almond trees, and then they also planted herbs around the trees that helped build the soil, but also meant enterprises for essential oil, organic essential oil production. And also they brought in sheep that were grazing and building the soil. So now we've got this whole production happening. But what was really, really interesting is the way that they approach this landscape. Is rather than, many of our business systems are just, the return on investment is how much the business can make, the profit, the financial profit. But here they were looking at return of investment, return of capital, return of nature, which is built into the design, return of social capital, which is supporting the communities and ensuring that people there have livelihoods, but also return of inspiration, return of meaning.
Yes.
Because in so many places that gets lost. So it's acknowledging the heritage, looking at, in this place, one of the things that people are proud of is that there's rock art, that there was a civilization there that's been there for thousands of years, and they look back to that history, the art, the music, the beauty. So all of that is part of the inspiration. And, when I had read about what Common Land does, I thought that sounds nice. But when I was there, I felt it. And that was really exciting, because profit in itself does not feed the soul. And, we're seeing this in Western cultures, that we've lost something, with the disconnection from nature. We're yearning for something. And what I saw in Spain was that young people who had felt that they needed to leave the area to have a future, young people are coming back. One reason is that they can have livelihoods now, but another reason is that it is exciting. And that's where the inspiration piece comes together. And it made me think about where I live, which actually is not very thriving economically. I live in a rural area that's had its ups and downs, but all that we're excited about. We love the beauty of our landscape. We love the maple sugar production. We love the working landscape. So, wherever we are, there's a heritage, there's magic, there's beauty. So that's what I saw really coming together in a very well thought out enterprise.
Yeah, that's so beautiful because I think I can actually relate to that. Kelly and I can relate to that. I live in a really small little community in northern New South Wales. We call our farm Heaven on Earth, and we're basically a hall. You know, our closest town is an hour away, and you know, we put together this beautiful music festival. And it took so much to put it together, and it was so hard to get volunteers along, and it was such a hard, you know, but we had this incredible night of this gala night where we had 250 people turn up. And then the next day we had, you know, 80% of our community turned up to clean up. They were like, oh my God. And it stayed with us, like that feeling of community. And, you know, we were in a terrible drought. It was a really tough time. And, you know, it's those things that actually inspire. It's actually the community connection and how we share our stories. And, you know, that scientific, all of that scientific stuff, it's really important, Walter. And the thing that really connects us is the inspiration and the joy and how we actually can contribute to our you know, our lives, our families, how we interact. And this is the beauty. That's actually the seed, the kernel of truth actually in this, the sacredness of it.
And they connect. So one thing that they're doing in this area of Spain to celebrate the culture is, you know, they're recording soundscapes. Let's listen to what the land sounds like as it is restored. And it's also connected with, in that area, they also had a regeneration festival where they were doing the work of restoring the landscape and planting. And what they did was they had recordings, which actually, I don't know how this worked, but Walter might find this interesting, which was kind of based on the soil metrics. They kind of made beats out of it. And then they were planting to the beat. So we can know what we're doing and why, and then have that extra level of enjoyment while, you know, applying these scientific principles through the music and the community and the creation of beauty.
Yeah, I actually remember reading this amazing series called the Cedars, is the Russian storytelling
the ringing cedars
of Russia, and how they actually used to, before they planted, they'd put the seeds in their mouth, and basically that, whatever it was, the response and the spiritual aspect of that created these thriving plants and thriving tree. It was just quite incredible storytelling. So, you know, those sort of stories that come through now are what bind us, I think.
I mean, just to be clear on that story, just for our audience, Helen, the ringing cedars of Russia, you would put the seeds in your mouth and suck on it for 9 minutes and then plant that seed, and the seeds biology would have adapted to your DNA, and it would actually produce in accordance with what was lacking in you, how it could be medicine for your unique system. And that was practiced in Russia for hundreds of thousands of years. And to be fair, I've done this. My last vegetable garden, I sucked on all those seeds and I had an amazing yield. And the warning risk is if someone who is not you eats that food, it may actually be discordant with them because it's now connected specifically to your DNA structure and your needs. I mean, I love all those stories. I love all these stories, and we're moving into such a fantastic time. So question for both of you, and this is going out for our educators and teachers who, at least here in Australia, are definitely starting to want to move regenerative agriculture and more sophisticated notions of regeneration into our school curriculums. So in your travels, have you come across any kick-ass school experiments that you could share with our educators listening today who might be inspired to take it into their classrooms next week?
I think you probably have something to say, Walter. I think we're thinking about the same person. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I mean, there's lots and lots of things, and depending on what the question, but a very good friend of both of ours, Dee Dee Firsthouse, she's got this wonderful little experiment with flour and water, where she's more or less sort of saying, look, here is flour, which is in a sense mineral dust, or exemplifies mineral dust. And of course, you pour water onto that mineral dust and it all runs off and erodes. But you bake that flour as bread and you create organic structures and matrices and a sponge out of it. And of course, then you pour water on the bread and of course it absorbs and really does what a soil does. And so that's a very, very wonderful illustration of, it is the same materials, but just by forming them in a organic matrix with life, with the yeasts and what have you, you've created a completely different composition and functionality. But so look, that's certainly a illustration of the sponge. But yes, there are lots and lots of those little experiments. But the biggest one, before we experiment, we just simply go, let's go and observe. Let's just go and observe what that earthworm is doing. Let's observe that lichen on that rock and realize that, hey, that lichen is eating the rock. It's having it for lunch, right? and just sort of then understand, or just ask those questions: why, how, what's it doing? And that richness is there for all of us, all in nature, everywhere. Fire versus fungi, okay, what's happening to that leaf when it falls on the ground? Does it sit there dry, lock up those nutrients until it burns? Or how rapidly is it broken down and reincorporated into new life in the soil and the further plant growth? So look, it's just a state of mind. So you don't even have to have the experiments. It's just the state of mind of observing, reading, listening to case studies or looking at case studies and just saying, okay, wow, how does nature do these things? Asking the questions, how does this work in nature? And it's marvelous.
I think there are more people that are developing curricula for children. I know that Dee Dee, I put her website up there, has developed some teaching materials. And I think that others have done that too. I'm tempted to start to list them, but I feel like I need to check them. And a friend of mine who teaches permaculture to children is also starting to give webinars for families. And, I'll just put one thing out there that you can start anywhere. So this friend of mine, her name is Monica Ibachachi, and she teaches permaculture to children in New York City. And she often works with just those trees on the sidewalk, those on a street, that trees have the soil, and she'll work with the children to add mulch to the soil, and then they can see what critters emerge. They can see how the soil gets broken down and life appears, and pollinators become more interested as the soil gets healthier. But even with just the simplest space, you can find lessons. There I am echoing what Walter said.
I think
it's an exciting space to move into at the moment with our educators, and especially with this big push on Zoom and everyone's starting to want to get their information out. It's just such an amazing time for cross-pollination of wisdom and information and different groups coming together. I love it. I'm so excited. So I have a wildcard question here from one of our viewers, and I like this. So if both of you were handed a check for $8 million, how would you spend it right now? What would be your priorities in providing solutions with $8 million each? Think about
I'm a little stuck, so if you have something to say.
Wow. You're both being shy.
Yeah, well, I never think in terms of those kinds of resources, but I guess it would need to be some kind of education and sharing, because it's all about changing the mindset as we begin to focus on what matters, which, we're talking about ecological function, once that becomes important to people, it will all shift. Once we start to value ecological function and not, as a colleague of mine says, the shiny objects, then the shift will have occurred. So I don't know. I'll have to think about that.
Look, and I totally agree with Judy. I think it's all about education, but more than education, it's actually sparking imagination, sparking excitement. You see, and I mean, look at a 4-year-old child and you say, look, here's some whale poo. And this whale poo can actually save the planet. And you can imagine writing a children's storybook of, here is the journey from that whale pool to a cooler planet. Or here's a water molecule being absorbed by the soil, going up in a plant, transpired, creating haze, creating cloud. And really here's the whole journey and excitement of that water molecule as it goes through these 10 different stages, driving hydrology, cooling, biosystems. And so, just exciting minds to say, yes, we can. Yes, this is the wonder of nature. And look, we've got to respect and we've got to love and we've got to enjoy this. And and $8 million can go enormously far in that, because they're just little videos, children books, case studies, just documenting the evidence in these wonderful, smart, simple ways.
The word that's kind of hovering around this, or that's coming to me, is imagination. Yeah. So what can spark the imagination and allow us to imagine what's possible? Because I think when we get stuck, it's due to a failure of imagination.
I watched this really beautiful, it was a 15-minute documentary of a young teenager boy in India, and he just became enamored with his surroundings. And his quote from the thing, and I've just got to hear it, he said, "Isn't it incredible how fascinating the world can become if we only change the way we look at things?" Like, that is such a powerful statement. If through our lens, everything changed as to what we perceived, and I think that's part of the visioning. What can we vision for our future through our own lens to really make some really, co-create amazing stuff together?
Yeah, and just creating those windows. We're not prescribing, dictating didactically. We're just creating windows into that wonder.
That's right. Windows into the wonder. I like the WW. I like that, Walter. The WW of Walter.
W as well.
Wonder from Walter.
You cracked yourself up, Helen. So, guys, let's, as we start to bring this session to a close, I would really like to leave with presenting your version of a vision for the future. So, it's my strong belief, as I've expressed, that we're moving into a time of great regeneration right now, that communities and cultures are going to be experiencing a surge in resources and support. And we're going to simply, the energetic template that we're going into as our consciousness has moved, or what I call to be the great awakening, or a great awakening, a broadening of our consciousness, is the problems of today and our past will no longer be a match for the energetics of our future. So with that in mind, the idea of, say, starvation in the world, I don't believe will be a match for the resonance that we're moving into. I think the solutions are already there. I think we're very conscious about how we can solve those problems. I think the resources are coming, and I think the people of the world are basically ready to let those problems go and move into a much brighter, more dynamic, thriving future where we see a massive surge, a renaissance across the planet coming from humanity and our natural geniusness as we, move back into understanding the beautiful relationship we have with the earth and with animals and with our own bodies and our nutritional intake. So on a final note with the show, I would love to hear, with all of that in mind, your most highest profound vision for the future of planet Earth. Drum roll, please.
Judith, yeah, you go for it, Judith.
Okay. I guess it is fairly simple that in healing our landscapes, we are healing ourselves. And as we heal ourselves, we will be naturally drawn to heal our landscapes, because I feel like a lot of what ails us are symptoms of our disconnection from nature and from land. We are creatures that have evolved in relationship to all of life. And as we reconnect with that, we will be drawn to healing, and our problems will, and what ails us will be healed.
And do you feel, Judith, that we are there? Do you think, are you witnessing and observing that shift?
I've seen, I think it's there's just too much. I see a lot of it. I don't think that what you just said, we would have heard that 2 years ago. I feel there's movement. I don't know where we are, but I feel we need to tell those stories and talk about it in order to help move us there.
Yeah.
And Walter?
Okay, from my point, there's two levels here, you see. First of all, nature and the world and the natural world, look, it's going to look after itself. It has done so wonderfully for 3.8 billion years on this planet. It'll continue. I mean, we've had meteorites, we've had earthquakes, we've had things much, much more extreme than anything we've experiencing. And nature's always used exactly these same processes that we've talked about to rapidly regenerate, rapidly heal, rapidly evolve, and actually ever create ever higher, more efficient biosystems. So there's no problems at all with nature. You know, she will look after the planet. But the other side of the coin is Homo hubris, right? And that's us. And whether we are so arrogant to think that it's got to be us or that it's our control, and whether we've got the wisdom to step down, listen, observe, wonder, all those things you said, and then respect, okay, we're only part of this natural process. Take the whales, for example. Yes, how do we basically not try to manage whales or control whales, but just respect and realize how stupid we were, and then do what we can to regenerate, but not, take control. And so with us, it's actually a big, big worry, because we've got actually a whole series of critical crises that are actually accelerating and compounding. And COVID is just a symptom of that as well, because, these are pandemics that are actually now showing how vulnerable, how susceptible, and how stupid we are socially. And so now the question is, have we got the time to make the changes? Or are we going to sort of get into a greenwash world where we talk about this stuff, but default back to politicians to say, what will they do about it? We haven't got another 50 years to just talk, deny, delay, because in the next 10 years, if we don't put these regenerative fundamentals into place at the grassroots level, then I think hydrological climate extremes, wildfires, floods, droughts, they're going to impact severely. So the question is, are we going to wake up in time through grassroots innovation, imagination, regeneration to create these lifeboats? But whatever happens, you see, nature is going to basically regenerate this planet. And the only uncertainty I've got, and I don't have the answer, is will we help her do it, or will we let her do it after we're gone? Full stop.
I will add one thing.
My answer is.
I'm sorry?
I know what my answer is. Where to help?
I was just going to say that we're lucky that there's a framework
that
the United Nations has declared the next decade, the UN decade on ecosystem restoration. So there is a global movement and raising global awareness of the possibilities of earth repair. So that's something that we can rally around and connect. There'll be a lot of connections and between, people doing this work all over the world.
I know for me, like one of the most simple and most profound truths that I sort of live my life by is that my eyes don't lie. And I am constantly exposed, on a daily basis, to extraordinary people from all around the world who are doing amazing things. And if I was to look at my life and my community and my environment, I can only tell you that the future is in safe hands. There are so many, millions and millions of us right now. We literally are the largest grassroots movement in the world. We literally are the largest underground movement in the world, and it has pipped the surface. That's what I'm feeling. Right? We have seen an amazing and an extraordinary surge in people and communities coming together in just our time with NRAD and Carbonate over the last 3-4 years. It's blown my mind. Like, I cannot say that there is a day that passes my life where I am not visually seeing and playing witness to an amazing surge of human love and care for their environment and each other. And I, as a young Australian, stand here and say I am proud of the shift that has happened across our planet. And I have nothing but hope that we're about to go through an intense surge of regeneration. And I hope that my sentiments get echoed across the plane and get heard by the world, because I believe I speak for millions and millions and millions of us.
Yep, very good. No, look, I fully agree. And I mean, that
Kelly,
hope, and I'm just really trying to put...
And Judith.
Helen, you're lagging. Your internet's lagging. Sorry, go, Walter.
No, look, and I'm fully with you.
Okay,
And
you speak.
Sorry.
It was so exciting. We've had a glitch in the system. See, everything went, woo, the energy went up.
Right. You blew it. You blew it, Kelly. No, all very good. Yeah. And no, look, totally with you in terms of the vision and so forth. And I agree. But it's really re-empowering that grassroots rather than defaulting back to 50 years of delay as we have done with climate change up to now.
Agreed. I think the surge has happened. I don't think we can default backwards. I think we're on a massive slingshot forwards right now. I definitely feel that momentum on the planet. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. It's very exciting. I agree.
So Helen, do you want to add anything here before we wrap it up? Or I'll just pause so that your lag can catch up with us.
I would just like to thank all of us. We've had an amazing, deep conversation, and I can't say much because I am lagging, but I'm just very grateful for the conversation. And we're going to put this on YouTube. So for anyone that's come in at the end, and also for Judith and Walter, if you want to share, we'll have that on YouTube by tomorrow. So thank you very much.
And
okay.
Just to remind everyone that Judith's new book is on the shelves, and the link will be under this clip. I'm so excited to finish reading it, and it's filled my heart with, you can hear the positive sentiment in my voice, and your book is one big echo of that. So you are responsible for the hope in me, Judith. Like, Here, I'm pumped, man. The world's in good hands. So is there anything either of you would like to say to conclude to our audience today, our beautiful National Regenerative Agriculture community, our beautiful Carbonate community, leaving us on sort of the last sort of sentiments? So we're going through what appears to be a bit of a dark night of the soul on planet Earth. Across the plane, everyone's dealing with some complicated issues in their local communities, their environment, within their own homes as a result of, what we're going down with the lockdown. So I'd love you guys to leave our audience with some words of thoughts, advice on our current situation, and maybe staying emotionally healthy, safe and sound, and inspired for the future that's ahead of us.
Well, look, thank you, Kelly, and thank you, everybody. And yeah, the bottom line is, let's just keep growing. Let's just keep regeneration. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And and stay curious, because that's where so much begins. When you say, how does the earth manage heat? How does this work? Why are reindeer moving in the snow? Just all of it.
Absolutely. Curiosity is the key to everything. And that's what we get taught and should be taught in our schools above everything else. Stay curious, human race. There's an amazing, magnificent, magical world ahead of us. So thank you so much to our wonderful guest today. Your contributions were awesome, and I'm sure our audience has absolutely enjoyed listening to both of you. And I would love to invite you both to be part of the National Regen Ag Day celebrations as we lead up to the festival in February here in Australia. So I'd love to invite you guys to come back on board for that celebration. And Helen, we've got our film night happening on Friday, of course. Do you want to share with the audience what the film is scheduled for this week?
Yeah, so this Friday, we've got a great movie, and I can't remember what it is. But I think we've got, I do remember. This Saturday night, we actually have, grassroots. This Saturday we have Poly Faces. So we've got a live of Poly Faces with Costa and the Dohertys, and having an amazing conversation. So we're going to screen the Poly Faces live and then have a great panel after it. So forgot about that one. But yes, that's what we've got coming up. So that's awesome. Thanks, Kelly.
All right. Well, I would like to say thank you so much to our audience for tuning in today. You can come and watch this again. Subscribe to our YouTube channel called REGENER8, and we'll be putting this through both of our Facebook pages. And thank you to our guests. Links will be under the description here. And I just hope you all have an amazing, inspired day today. Best day ever.
Thank you.
We will see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.